Okay, Amanda, you're on. Thank you.
All right. All right, let's go ahead and get started as people are starting to rejoin. So as I was saying that I wanted to go over some things that can really advance their data entry and your form setup, like branching logic, missing data codes, making forms repeatable, field action tags and field embedding, how to use e-consent and to set up alerts and notifications in REDCap, and other advanced features that can just make the program really do a lot more for you than just setting up a basic data entry form and sending out a regular survey. So let's try sharing my screen. Perfect. So the first thing I wanted to go over that we didn't talk about yesterday is branching logic. What branching logic, in some other programs you'll hear it called skip logic. It's how you can hide certain fields so that they only appear if people answer in a particular way. And one of the most common places that people want to do that is when they have an other option. So in my genre question, I have other, and I have it coded as 88. But if they select other, then I want to know what they have to say, what their actual favorite is. So how you do that in REDCap is you need to create a new field, and this would be a text field, so that they can type in their answer. And as I give it the variable name, I find it's really very helpful if you can link it to the original question. So for this one, I'm going to call it genre of, to make it very clear when I'm looking at these, how they're related and how they work together. And now that I have a place for them to enter their other answer choice, I'm going to click on the green branching arrows so that I can set up the branching logic. In REDCap, the branching logic always goes in the child question. It goes into the question you want to hide, not the parent question that is controlling all the other questions. And there are two ways you can set it up. So you can use advanced branching logic, or a little bit easier, you can use the drag and drop builder. So with the drag and drop, I come down here and I find the field I want to base it off of. And I just drag it over and it adds it to this advanced logic up here so that I can see it. I can choose if I want and logic or logic. So if I want all the fields to have to be true, or if just any one of them can be true to trigger this question showing up. There is also, so branching logic, you use it when you want to hide a question. So if you have a series of pregnancy questions that you don't want to give out to your assigned male at birth participants, you can use it to hide those questions if they give that as a sex, or to give it or to show them if they give gender as assigned female, for instance. Another example is here where I have an other answer choice. I don't want everyone to see that. I definitely don't want everyone to fill it out. I just want it to be available to the people who select that other answer choice. So after I use the drag and drop builder, I can always come back up here to the advanced syntax and make any changes I want to. So I could change some ands to ors, I can add parentheses, anything I need to do. The drag and drop is just giving me a structure I can work with. And for really simple pieces of branching logic where I'm only using one or two criteria, this is a lot easier and simpler. And if you are ever caught on your branching logic, they have a link here that will take you to the FAQ section on how to use branching logic. So if I save that, and then we go into do data entry, add a new participant, and then I come down here to other, nothing's been filled out. I click on the other option, and I have the option to come in here and add in a new field. So that's a very straightforward, simple way of using branching logic. You can get as complex as you want to with it, or you can have it just really just be based off of one or two things and be very easy to do. Another thing that can help you with how you're collecting data is to standardize how you want to deal with missing data. Yes, I will try and zoom in here a little bit. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. So missing data can mean a lot of different things in a REDCap, well, in any kind of research project. Data might be missing because it simply wasn't available. It might not have been applicable to a specific question. So REDCap lets you standardize that across the project. If you go to the project setup page, optional modules and customizations, additional customizations, and scroll down a little bit, you have the option to set missing data codes that you can use across the entirety of your project. So every single question in your project will use the same set of codes that is then really easy to work with when you're pulling the data and working with the analysis. You can use any kind of codes that you want to. So I've got a couple examples in here of 888 for not applicable and 999 for no data. They have some other options here that might be relevant to different studies that you could just add if you wanted to. Or you could add the basic and come over here and say, I want no information, but I'd rather it be 777 than a text field. So if I type that in, so now if I go to data entry, let's save. And go back to that record I was working in. Next to every single item here is this little circle with an M. And I can come in here and mark this field as missing. And I could also just come in here and type and save the data. So let me collapse this down so I can see my screen a little better. Let's save and stay. So even here where I just typed the data in, it recognized that's a missing data code and applied it to the field. And so this will help standardize across your project. Like I talked about yesterday, if you have any kind of these multiple choice items, which these codes functionally are, then you want it to be as standardized as possible. Yeah, you can use negative numbers. The only place where that can get a little bit complicated is if when you do a data export as a CSV. Occasionally I've had programs not like reading and saving a negative for some reason, but most of the time it works just fine. I would just run a quick test before to make sure that, I'd run a quick test if you're going to use it to make sure that it works the way you expect it to when you do your analysis. Another item that you can do to help your data entry process, I'm just going to leave this record open so I can keep coming back to it as an example, is making forms repeatable. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, where sometimes you have a form that you want to collect data in multiple times, you don't know how many times. That's where you use a repeatable instance. The example I gave yesterday was the idea of collecting medications, where you could just keep adding and add one more for medication. You can also do it with a visit form if you don't know how many visits there are going to be. Family histories are another place, or contact logs. So if you want to track every time that you have emailed, called, etc., a participant, and what the dates are and what the outcomes are, a repeating form works for that as well. So if this is a basic project without the longitudinal functionality, then I just select the forms that I want to make repeating from the list. For longitudinal projects, I have to make a couple more choices. Within every event, I have to say if I just want to repeat one instrument, or potentially more, but they're all separate from each other, or if I want to repeat the entire set of questions. So if I just have a visit event, I might want to repeat all the forms in that event each time, and they're locked together so that visit instance one, all those forms have been answered at the same time. For here, we're going to keep it all just that one form, repeating separately in each event. So what it looks like for data entry is that you can come in and add your information, and then in your save options, you have a new option here, save and add new instance. And I can just add as many of these as I want to. as many as are relevant. And then when I come back to the record homepage, it shows me all my different repeating instances. And because when I set this up, oops, I said I wanted to pipe in a label. So I wanted to type in what I had in the movie name so that it showed up next to the repeating instance. So that's what we see here. And if I come in here and I change this, you can see the label changes with the new instance. So it's a really powerful tool that can add a lot of functionality to a project and a lot of complexity. And the reason I wanted to show that one first is those items first is because the next thing I want to show you is our action tags. There are a bunch of places in REDCap where you can get an overview of how action tags work and what all of them are. There's this on the project setup page that lists all of them out and goes into great detail on how to use them. When you're editing a form, and it's at the top of the page here. And then when I come in, there's a link to it here when I'm editing the form itself too. So what are the different action tags? We've got a few different categories they kind of fall into. We have one that can capture the username of the person entering data. So REDCap always has this information. It always logs who's doing what actions in REDCap, but that's not stored as a searchable piece of information that you could, for example, pull in a report. @username captures that as an actual piece of data so that you know the first time the form was filled out, who the person was who filled it out. @now captures when the form or the survey is loaded. And you can use @now in the timestamp to figure out how long someone took to take a survey. @today is like @now, but it gives you just the date, not the date time. And then you can automatically capture latitude and longitude. There are also a bunch that work with data entry. So one of the most powerful ones and one of the most useful ones is this @default. @default will pre-fill a value for you if the form's icon status is that gray, never been filled out, never been saved. If a form has been saved before, REDCap will not provide a default value, even if the field is null. It does not want to risk overwriting important saved data, and a null can very easily be important saved data. So it only pulls this information in for unsaved forms that have not had data saved in them previously. You can use regular text in your @default form. You can pipe variables in. So here I'm piping in the first name and last name fields, or you can use a combination of both. And it's a really easy and great way to pre-fill information. If you don't want people to type indefinitely in a text field, you can limit the number of characters that they have available to them. So if I'm asking people to enter a year, there's not a validation for just a year, but I can validate it as a number and say the character limit's 4, and that will really help limit it and make people actually enter the correct information. Similarly, you can set a word limit instead of just a character limit. If you want to hide the today and now button for just a specific question, there's an action tag for that. The use case for this one is really any kind of date that you're entering in the past. It is very unlikely that the person's date of birth is today, unless it is a parent filling it out for a newborn. And even then, it's fairly unlikely they're filling it out on the day of. So you might want to hide the today button to prevent people from getting sloppy and putting in bad data. The missing data codes are fabulous, but the reason I had to show them to you first was there's also a action tag to hide them so that the missing data codes don't actually show up for a specific question if they're irrelevant for some reason. If something absolutely has to have an answer, there is no other alternative. You can hide what's typed in a field with password mask, and this will give you the little ... or that you see when you type in a password in pretty much anywhere. A really key thing I want to stress about this one is it is not encrypting anything. It is making it so someone cannot look over your shoulder and see what you're typing in. It is not encrypting what you are typing in the way a full password, a full password setup would. But it is very helpful if you don't want people necessarily looking over the shoulder and being able to see if you have a password field to come back into a survey, what that password is. And then you can assign a placeholder value. So this will show up just like that in the field. It'll be grayed out. You can type over it. It's not actual data. It's just giving people an idea of what kind of data to put in the field and and how it should be done. And then we have a bunch that apply to multiple choice questions. So at hide choice, we'll hide any answer choices that you want to. I just give it the code of the answer choice I want, and I can hide more than one. This is really powerful for retiring answer choices. If something is no longer an option, but you don't want to lose the data associated with the answer you've already selected in that option. So if 100 people have filled something out and you want to keep that data, but you don't want anyone else to see that answer choice anymore, you can hide the choice so it doesn't show up in data entry, but it's still in the data when you pull it in the project. With checkbox questions, you often want to limit the number of answers people can check. And that's what @max check does. You can only pick 2 answers out of all those checked answers. And I will show all of these in action after I walk through them. Similarly to max check, at none of the above will, if you select, you tell it which answer choice or choices are your none of the above options. And if you select one of those, you will not be able to select any other choice in the checkbox list. And then sometimes you don't want all the questions to be in the same, all the answer choices to be in the same order for everybody. You're putting together some kind of quiz, for instance. So you can set them to be at random order, and all the answer choices will be shuffled every time someone loads the form. And then you can, by accessibility here, I mean what can literally be accessed. So there are a series of hidden answer choices. You can hide a field always for data entry if you're using the mobile app, just on a data entry form, just in the PDF that's created, or just if you're looking at it in a survey. So I've got an example here. We'll look at this as both a form and a survey, so you can see the difference in how they show up. And then you can make a form read-only so that people can't type anything into it. They can only read the information. And for all of these, I tried to do just one at a time, but for read-only, it really only works if you already have data there. So I'm using at default to pre-fill data that I then won't be able to change. So what that actually looks like. So it's asking my location information because I'm capturing latitude and longitude. I grant that. So it's capturing my username, the date time when this form was loaded, and the date when it's loaded, my latitude and longitude. And these red lines here that you see at the end of all of these automatically filled in ones, that's telling me that something's been populated in the browser that does not agree with what the backend, with what the server has stored in those fields. It's letting me know there's a difference there. Something's not quite right. And that will go away when I save it. So for the default value, the participant's name, here my character limit is 4. So as much as I try clicking 5 here, I can't enter. Similarly, 3 words, I can't keep going. The Today Now button is hidden, so I have to hide, or I have to type it out. Here you can see that missing data button that's available in all the other questions is missing just for this one. Here's the password mask. And here's that disclaimer I was talking about, that it's obfuscated. Administrators can see it, and it's not being specially encrypted in any way. And then here you can see my placeholder value that I can easily overwrite. In the multiple choice questions, the answer choice horse is gone. Here I get a warning if I try to select more than 2. Here I can select as many as I want, but when I hit none of the above, it makes me clear everything else. And then obviously my days of the week here are in random order. My hidden fields are gone. The only one I can see here is the one that is available on a form, and my read only can't be saved. And if I save, you can see all those red lines are gone because now I've saved and synced what I have in the data entry form with what's in this on the server. And I want to show very quickly, if I open this up as a survey instead, username is now survey respondent. Surveys are not recorded as part of a specific user's action. They are always survey respondent. It's still recording all the information. But it's not pulling that participant's name because I'm in another event. And if I scroll down here, my this can only be seen on a form is gone. And instead I have this can only be seen on a survey. And we will come back to smart variables in just a minute, but I'll leave that open. So those are action tags. They are incredibly powerful when it comes to customizing your data entry forms and your surveys to make sure that every single question works exactly the way you want it to. And then another really powerful item that I'm going to show, and before I show you what it looks like before I show you how to do it, is field embedding. Now I added this form a little bit later than all the other ones, and I never designated it to any events. So it wasn't showing up for me to do data entry. So now that I go through, I add it to the events I want it to. And if I go back to add edit records, jump back to Anna Cleaves, it's now available for data entry and I can show it off. So what field embedding lets you do is basically move around how your fields are displayed in the project. So instead of having everything just in a straight list, I can arrange things in tables. I can have my text field for others show up right next to the question. Again, a different example of how I can have things show up in tables. And you can see I can choose whether or not, with this table up here, I chose not to include the buttons, this history and the missing data. I can put those in if I want to. And even within my checkbox fields, I can stack my multiple choice questions. So these are all separate multiple choice questions, just stacked within the same checkbox, stacked within my checkbox question. I can even put things in the field notes. So if I want people to specify their units, that's a great place. I want an 8-inch round. Or it's not gonna let me do that. I want an 8-inch cake. And then I'm going to specify that I prefer that to be in inches, not centimeters. An 8-centimeter cake would be either a single serving or a very sad cake for a large number of people. So the way you do that, going back to the online designer, you have to create all of those fields individually. So I had to create my breakfast, lunch, and dinner fields for every single day. And then to get them to show up in a table, I created a descriptive field and I turned on this rich text editor, and that's available every single time you create a data entry field, you can use this rich text editor to make it easier to bold, center, color, use bullet points, or in this case, use tables. And field embedding works a little bit like piping. In piping, I would have put the name, the variable name in square brackets to pull whatever was in that field to show up in this particular spot. For field embedding, I'm using curly brackets instead and putting the variable name in the middle of them. There we go. And whatever field is specified inside those curly brackets, the actual data entry spot for that field is going to show up instead. So using the rich text editor, can I do font size? That's a yes, but answer. I can do font sizes like you would if you were writing a web page. So I can't say font size 12, but I can say paragraph or the heading sizes. And if you are comfortable with a little bit of HTML, I could also instead just write the HTML code in instead of using the rich text editor and say font equals, and then set the font sizes up that way. So the rich text editor, you can get close, but it's a little bit different than how you would use it in a word processing program. So with these field embedding, I'm just putting the variable name in curly brackets and saying where I want them to show up. Same sort of thing happens with my multiple choice question up here. I don't have to create a big descriptive field. I can embed another field inside of my answer choices here. So I'm not using tables or anything special. I'm just embedding it next to it. And I put a few spaces in so that it wouldn't appear right next to it. That looked really crowded to me when I tried it. To get the icons to show up, those history and field comment and the missing data icons, I put in the field name and then I add this. Then I add the the colon rather, and the word icons, and that's all it takes to get the icons to show up. Whereas embedding all those multiple choice questions into the checkbox question. So this BR, that's a little piece of HTML that I found made it show up a little more nicely. It stands for line break. And it's all it does is force a line break so that my flavor question showed up right underneath the ice cream. And then on my flavor question, I have branching logic. So it only shows up if they have checked this first option in the like question. So if like is my variable name, answer choice 1. If in like, answer choice 1 is set to 1, checked, then show this ice cream question. Similarly, my ice cream other question only shows up if that flavor question is set to other. So you can get really complicated and really advanced in how you want to set up your field embedding. One other example I'll show is here where I had it in the field notes. Again, it's just variable name in curly brackets, and I specify putting it in the field notes. Can you specify a font size on the rich text editor? Recording of the session, I'm guessing probably today or tomorrow, but I'm sure that Nana can answer that question better than I can. So when you're using the rich text editor, you can get some really cool stuff. You can make it look a really detailed way. There are two things I want to make sure that you're aware of as you're doing it. One is, as you're building it in the rich text editor, create a test record. That would not be the right form. Create a test record and have it open at all times so you can keep refreshing and keep seeing how the changes that you're making in the field embedding, how the changes you're making in the online designer actually look on the data entry form. Anytime when you start manipulating the appearance on this level, it's just going to take a little bit more time sometimes to get things to look exactly the way you want them to. So be willing to set aside some time for yourself to really play with it and constantly see how the changes you're making are affecting what things look like and how the functionality works. The other thing I want to warn about this is with PDFs. So if I let me go into the one I filled out. So if I download this PDF, it doesn't always translate great between how it looks in the data entry form and how it looks if you do the PDF document, if you transfer it to the PDF document. So you can see it's not quite as neat and ideal as one might hope. If you know that you're going to be really reliant on the PDF documents of how something was filled out, you may not want to use a lot of field embedding. However, if you are just going to be using the CSV file, or if you are going straight into a stats program, all the fields exist. It doesn't affect anything there. It's really just a question of how the formatting translates from the web page to the PDF. The next thing, and finally with field embedding, I wanted to point out, just like with action tags, there's a link here for field embedding, and they have a great explanation of how to use it. So it's a really easy place you can come back to and reference as you're playing with your own document. The next thing I wanted to show you were smart variables. So smart variables are a relative thing. They will change every single time based on the new information being presented to them. So when I use the action tag at username, it pulled my username and then it saved it as a piece of data, never to be changed. That was hard coded at that point. The action tag at username would change every time the user changed. So I'm going to walk through all the different smart variables and give you a rough idea of some of the use cases for them, and then I'll show you kind of how it looks when it pulls them. So a bunch of these smart variables center around username. They can pull the username, the user's full name. If the user's in a DAG, it can pull the name of their DAG and that DAG ID. This can be really useful, particularly like at username, if you have questions that only should show up if a certain person is doing the data entry. If no one else needs to see it, then no one else needs to see it. But if you can put that username equals a person's username in branching logic, so the question only shows up for a specific person doing data entry. There are a number of usernames that surround the record ID, pulling the record name and showing you what DAG the record might be in. For data entry forms, it can tell you whether or not you're looking at a data entry form, or the alternative would be a survey. It can give you the URL for that data entry form or a clickable link. And it can give you the official instrument name and instrument label, so that if you ever need to refer to those instruments, you can do so in a way that REDCap recognizes. It will pull that information. It does the same thing for surveys. It tells you if something is a survey. It can pull the URL and when it pulls the survey URL, it's pulling the URL that is unique to the record you are in, the form you are in, and gives you that URL. Same with the link here. The survey queue URL will be the survey queue URL associated with the record that you are currently in. And then one of the places where it gets the most fun to me is referencing events. So if you have a longitudinal project, sometimes you need to reference items in other events. For example, I might want to pull forward weight each time, or height type something that, in an adult population, doesn't really change. You'll definitely have a spot for it in your first event, but you can just pull that, it'd be very helpful to just pull that value forward and pipe it in all your later events, so you don't have to retype it every single time because it's unlikely to change. Or medications. Have it pre-fill the medications I said last time, so that you can just go through, verify that it's still the same and keep going, not have to type all of them out every single time. REDCap gives every single event a unique name when you create it. So when I create events, it creates a unique name for each one automatically. And if I want to reference a variable in a specific event, I will prefix where I'm piping the variable name with the unique event name in square brackets. And that tells REDCap where to go look, what event to go in and look for to find that variable and display. The smart variable for events makes it so instead of having to reference a specific event, I can reference something relative. I can reference the previous event or the next one, so that I'm just always pulling forward from the previous instead of always pulling forward from just the very first one. I can reference the very first or the very last. All of that information it gives me so much more flexibility when I'm pulling data around or referencing things in branching logic. Smart variables are an incredibly powerful tool for a complex project setup. Like with everything else, there's a link here on how to use smart variables, and it goes through absolutely all of them. I shortened out some of them because they're almost identical. But you can see the entire list here. And how these look, so just displaying them. You can see it pulling forward, so my username and my full name. I'm not in a DAG, so it's just showing me a blank. The record name, the record's not in a DAG. I am looking at this as a data entry form. Here's the URL. Here's a link. Takes me right back to the same spot. Here's the official instrument name, and here's the label I gave it. It is not a survey, but if I wanted to go to the survey for this instrument, for this record, I can do that. And now it's telling me, yes, it is a survey. You notice my username here is changed to survey respondent. And then it's giving me the event and arm information that I'm in. And you can also use it on repeating things. So I cheated a little bit earlier and had the @hidden action tag on this display in my repeating form. If I want to jump back here, now that I've taken it off, it's going to tell me what instance I'm in, what the previous one is, the next, the first, the last. And that changes depending on what instance I happen to be in at the time. And this lets me reference, and I can use this in piping or in branching logic the exact same way I used it with the different arms. If I want to reference the previous instance or the next one, I can do so. I just append, so I put for the instances, I put it after the variable name. And that will reference the instance I can say a specific number, or I can use one of these smart variables to reference a relative instance. So smart variables are a very, very powerful tool. They can be, again, there's something that you want to make sure you test, because with them, everything is relative. So you're going to want to play with it and make sure the things you're putting in work in every situation that you're going to encounter, that you're not going to get to a place where the relative wasn't actually what you wanted. But they can do so much and save you so much time. As we move to telehealth, one of the most common things that has come up is wanting to be able to do consent online. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new survey here for consent. Let's drag it to the top. And I'm going to, actually, no, that should work. I'm going to go in here and just move a couple of fields so that my name fields are on the consent survey. Instead of on my favorite survey. And we'll grab email too, because that's a pretty powerful field. So if I'll enable this as a survey, and REDCap has a really powerful, really helpful e-consent framework that you can use. It's available at the bottom here. This e-consent and PDF auto archiver. So what the auto archiver does is, as soon as they submit the survey, it will save a compact PDF of that response in the file repository, and so you can download it at any time. It's essentially creating a hard copy of the response for you automatically. You can use that on its own, or you can use it with the e-consent framework. So this is a very formalized process that will require the participant to review their consent information and sign off on it a second time before they can submit, and it gives them a chance for them to download the consent document. So I can choose if I want this e-consent to be editable after they fill it out. I'm going to leave that as a no for now. Say what version of the consent it is, and what my first name and last name fields are that I want it to reference. You might have a consent type that you're putting in. You might want to specify a date of birth field. You might want to force a signature field. That would be erased if they click the previous button. For right now, I'm going to keep it simple. We're just going to go with first and last name and save changes. Because I just created a new form in a longitudinal project, I need to assign it to an event. And consent's only going to happen the first time. I'm not going to reconsent every single time. So now, let's go back into our record. Actually, let's create a new record for this. We'll do it through the public survey link. That's one of the most common ways you're going to do it. So I opened up my consent survey, and I think I skipped Jane Seymour when I was creating records before. So I'll put in here this time. I fill out the information that's on my consent form. And then I get this read-only version I can see. I could download it or print a copy of it if I wanted to as a participant. And then I have to go through and electronically certify that the above information is correct. And I hit submit. So now if I go to the file repository, I have this tab, PDF Survey Archive, and it has saved a PDF that I can download. And it's good time. It's also showing me what record this is associated with. I can jump straight to that record if I want to. The survey name, the event it's in, if it's repeating, the participant's name, and then this is the only time REDCap records that IP address. But I now have a copy of this consent document for my own records as well as the data entry form in REDCap. So obviously in your own consent document, you'd probably have a descriptive field that had all the consent information. You may have them consent yes, no to a few different items, depending on how detailed your consent is. Exactly how your consent is going to be set up is something you're going to want to talk to your IRB about. They're going to have standards that of what they want to make sure is displayed, what needs to be captured at what point. So talk to your IRB about it, but you can go to them with this tool that you're using this program. It is HIPAA compliant. It has a special module for consent. It captures this information. And I can choose, if I go into that record, even as I'm going in here as a super user, as an administrator. And even as an administrator, there is no way for me to come back in and change these responses unless I turned on that option in the module. So it's a very secure way of doing the consent process. And it was designed so that institutions could take it and make that part of their REDCap Part 11 compliant if they did all the other certification work. But the technology was set up to meet the standards that were required there. Another really useful feature of REDCap are these alerts and notifications. These are a little bit like surveys in the sense that you're sending an email from inside of REDCap outside, and you can include links to a form, a record, a survey, any of that information, those smart variables where I was pulling the form URL or the record ID, displaying the record ID or that survey link. This is a really powerful way to use those. So how it works is your first step is going to say, when is this alert going to be triggered? When do I want this to be sent? Do I want it to be sent anytime a record is saved on a specific form? When it's saved, but a certain thing is true? Or only when certain logic is true? And this is often the case if you're using some kind of date diff calculation. But it is also the option that requires the absolute most testing to make sure it's always going to work the way you want it to, no matter how that logic happened to become true. So let's go with a slightly simpler option of when a record's saved on a specific form or survey with conditional logic. So I will say I want this to be true when something is saved on my favorite survey with any form status, not just if it's complete. And let's go in and take a look at that form survey, our favorite survey. And let's say age is over 18, or age is simple, basic, easy logic. You can also ensure that logic is still true before sending notifications. And this is key if you want to put in some kind of stop logic to disable a schedule alert. If you have an alert that's going to be going out not immediately, but after some time has passed, you might want to build in a field in your project that says, don't send any more emails. Don't send if this field is checked. That could be used if your participant dropped out or if they had a sudden grade change in status that you need to address manually. You might have people go in and have that field checked. And if that field is checked, but in the alert or a survey invitation is scheduled but not sent, you want to have this ensure logic is still true. And you want to put a piece of logic in here that says, and stop does not equal yes, whatever your stop field happens to be. And it will double check to make sure that piece of logic is still true before sending it. If for some reason stop has become yes, it will cancel the alert, it will cancel the invitation, it won't send to someone who potentially has left your study, for instance. After you've set up what you want your trigger to be, you can set up your limit. So once per instrument. So it doesn't matter how many events that instrument shows up in, once per instrument only, once per event, and also every time a repeating instance for event is saved. We'll stick with the once per record. You can say when you want it to go out. These are the same choices you have when you're sending out a survey invitation. And how many times you want it to go out. If it's recurring, you set up how many times, every day, every other day, once a week. And then you can give a maximum number of times you want it to go out, because it may be defeating the point if it sends more than 3 times, or you may want it to send every single time forever. Then you're going to set up who the email is coming from, just like with your survey invitations, and who it's going to. You can link it to a project user, or you can link it to an email field in your event or email field in your project. Or you can, and this is one of the places where it gets really different from a survey invitation, you can manually enter emails and have this alert go out to someone who is completely unconnected with your project. So if you just need, and if you have an advisor who, they don't actually need to get into the project, they don't need to be on it, they just want to know every time a record's created for some reason, you could set that up so that they just receive an alert that says a new record has been created in the project. No links, just informational, and manually enter their email here so they don't have to get access to your project to see that particular update in the project. Give it a subject and then whatever message you want to. And this is someplace where piping and smart variables really come into play. So I could say something like, and I'm invariably going to mistype something, but I think that kind of gives the idea. It'll pipe in whatever the relative record ID is that triggered this, and then provide the form URL for that record in the favorite survey. And it won't let me save it without filling in all the information. Once the alert's been true, it'll show you the basics of it, where it's been triggered. And then there's a log here so that you can see all past and future notifications. And if I want to, I can disable it, or I can show deactivated alerts, permanently delete or re-enable. And if I have several alerts that are very similar, I can just start copying them and make the small changes I need to between them. So really powerful way of letting you know what's going on in your project, of spreading information. The first place where this kind of functionality got asked for was when patients were filling out surveys where they indicated there might be a risk of self-harm. That last question on the PHQ-9, for instance. Researchers wanted immediate notification if someone filled out their survey in a way that indicated they may be at risk. So they wanted an alert to go to them only if the survey was filled out in a specific way. So they would get it anytime. They didn't have to wait to check the project when someone might need help. And the alert in the whole functionality really just grew out of that ability. Another really useful feature is the code book. And this is going to be, the code book is one of the most incredibly useful tools in terms of working inside of your project. It's not quite as fancy in terms of enhancing the functionality. What it is, REDCap builds this for you automatically as you are creating your project. And it gives you all the variable names, all the field labels, and it'll tell you how things have been validated, if they've been marked as identifier, if they have range. For your multiple choice questions, it gives you the codes, and it tells you what kind of question, drop down or checkbox. If you've got branching logic, it'll show you that. This is someplace you can always come and look. If you're not sure what the form's official name is, it displays it here. If you have a piece of branching logic that is suddenly giving you an error and you're not sure why, I can come here and just search for every place where that shows up and check that what I have in the branching logic makes sense. Maybe I changed the variable name here, but I didn't change it in the branching logic. It's a really easy way to find that out. Your statisticians will like it. It's the perfect reference guide. The codebook explains what is in your project. And it's a really powerful reference tool when you're trying to figure out what's going on with your project or explain your project to somebody else in a really human readable way that makes sense to us, not just a machine. Speaking of analysts and some of that back-end items, there they are. Another really handy feature that I think is heavily underutilized are the data quality rules. So I mentioned these a little bit yesterday, but not a whole lot. These are rules that can help you look to see, is the information in your project good? Do I have questions with blank information? Or do I have questions with blank information in required fields? Anything that's out of range? Do I have outliers? One of the best ones here is this incorrect value in calculated fields. If you are using a calculated field and you change the calculation, you can come here, execute it to see where those discrepancies are. And then if I had one, it would give me a single button that I could click to update the value in every single field in the project where the value stored in the calculated field was incorrect. One click, the entire project updates everything for you. You can also create your own rules. So we can create an age check that shows up if age is less than, let's go with 25. And I can make it execute in real time. So if I add that, and then I go and add edit records, if I try to enter an age that's too young, I immediately get an error. That this is violating a set rule I have for the project. And then I can later come back and exclude if for some reason I have a great exception. Or it lets me know I really need to go back in and change my value. And now it's letting me save properly. So that's a real-time data entry check that I can set up on my project to help make sure that I'm getting the best quality data possible. Another feature I mentioned briefly yesterday is the ability to import data into the project. Oops, there we go. REDCap has import templates that you can download. Where I could just copy and paste all the information I want to upload here. So if I want to create a record 7, I need to say what event I'm going into since it's longitudinal. And I know exactly where to go look that up, which isn't there, it's here. See if I can, there we go, a little more readable that way. It's not a repeating instrument. There's no data access group involved. I just add that basic information, save it as a CSV, and I could copy over however much data I want to here. So I could copy over the information for 200 records and import them all in one if I happen to have that data as sitting around. Go back to the import tool, choose my file. And I managed to do it without errors. So if there was something in here, for example, I had put text in a number field, it would give me an error. Let's go back and do that actually. So I know this is a number field. Let's save some text in it. And let's have it give me that critical error. So this is an this is an error it just can't handle. I have to fix it before I can upload it. But you notice it's telling me what record it is, what the field name involved is, and then it's telling me the error. The value isn't validated because it doesn't follow the expected format. If I wasn't sure what the expected format is, I go to the code book and look it up. Age, oh, it has to be a number. So we come back here and make that a number. Then we choose the file again. The error is corrected. It lets me review everything that I want to enter. No data over here. These little gray zeros are for checkbox fields. The default value, if something is unchecked, it has a default value of 0. And so that's what it's telling me, is that there's a default value of 0 already in there. I checked, it all looks good. I want to go with this. I import. And now the data is showing up on my dashboard. So really, really, really helpful if you are moving data into REDCap from another system, if you are getting data from multiple sites that you need to add in, if you're getting an epic export that you need to add in. You might have to do a little bit of translation. Maybe the multiple choice codes are different, or you have something validated at 1 decimal point and they have it validated at 2. It can take a little bit of playing, but it's a much faster and easier way to get all the data in than hand entering every single item if you have a big file that you can import. And the last thing I wanted to show you while I was demonstrating is the log. And this is coming back to things you can use to troubleshoot. Part of what makes REDCap HIPAA compliant is that every single action taken in the project is logged with who did it, when they did it, what the action is, and then exactly what was done. So I can see every piece of data that I've changed. I can see every time I've done something to manage or design the project, all my activating, deactivating alerts, every action I have taken in this project shows up in the log. Every action anyone takes in the project will show up in the log, including, it's going to be it's going to be a little annoyed at me for this because it's always a lot, but page views. It doesn't show these by default, but if I want to go back and see exactly what someone's been looking at in the project, I can do that. Every single piece of that information is logged and accessible to you. So if you're trying to figure out when and how a piece of data got changed, you can come to the log and say, something's wrong with record 5. I need to know every single time it was changed and who changed it and what they changed, so that I can figure out how to set it up and what the best, I can figure out and how to fix the problem, or if the problem has already been fixed and I just need to know how and why. So the log is an incredibly powerful tool. It's also one that you may want to limit access to. It's probably not something every single person who does data entry needs to be using in the project, but it's a really helpful way of working with it. So again, with me throwing a lot of information out there in a really short time period, I could continue on for probably I could continue on for a while about all the little details of information and ways that you can tweak REDCap projects. But I think between the basic setup we talked about yesterday and all of these different advanced features I've shown today, that those are the majority of the tools that you need to do some really cool things within the program. So from that, are there any questions I can answer now? And again, I know I threw a lot of information at people in terms of a lot of things that people probably just want to play with. But if there's anything I can help with now, I'd love to.
Okay, thank you so much, Amanda. And if there are any questions, there's a time to ask for day 1 and day 2. And also, if you have any questions regarding REDCap, not pertaining to this training, but any issues that you face, any questions that you face, let us know, and probably Amanda can help you fix that too. And let me
Well, it's not too project specific.
Yes. Let me start with a question. My question. Let's say you're doing a survey, right? And you have multiple pages. How do you implement progress bar to know, like 1%, 2% until sometimes it helps the user to complete?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Let me share again. So REDCap doesn't do a straight progress bar by default in the plain programming. One option you have is in the survey settings. Let's see if it's, so if I display one section per page, I can have it display page numbers at the top so people can at least see what they're doing. But if you want to do a more formalized project bar, you need to use a little bit of HTML. And something I can send you that you can pass on is a really great REDCap project, or just REDCap survey actually, created by Jelena Fijgant at I believe she's at the Melbourne Health Services. I can look up her exact information, or it's probably at the bottom here. But she has a really great guide to using HTML and REDCap here, and it lets you play around and test all of it. And one of the items she includes is the project bar. So I am happy to include just the link to it on our REDCap. So I'll put that in the chat window that anyone can bookmark and use. I'm also happy to share the project with you. And all credit goes to Jelena for putting it together and making it so accessible to people.
All right, thank you so much. There's a question from Judith. You know what? You can unmute yourself and ask a question, then you can mute back. So Judith, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. This is Shiva. If I have, I mean, I'm just starting out my project, so I'm planning to build it during winter break. And so if I have any questions, is it okay to contact you?
Yeah, go. Feel free. There's only so much I can sometimes help with if I can't actually see the project in question. But if you have questions on how something works, or you can share screenshots of what's giving you trouble, I'm happy to give it my best shot.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much. This is Judith. I have a quick question. I added some questionnaires to a survey that was already enabled. Unfortunately, some parts of the sections were not able to be viewed by my other team members, and I can't figure out exactly what went wrong. I'm new to REDCap, so I don't know what might have happened. I could share my screen if there's anything.
Sure. Why don't you, as long as there's no PHI, why don't you share your screen? We can take a quick look and see if it's something obvious I can help with, if that's okay.
Yeah. Just a second.
So is this a longitudinal project?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Hold on one second. It's just kind of cleaning up. All right, I think I missed it. Can you just 1 second? So anyhow, for some reason I can't get it up right now.
Okay.
But
why don't you shoot me an email and we can chat about it, and you can maybe send me some screenshots.
Okay, that works. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Let me see. Okay, so we after this is done, we'll download the video, then we'll put it on the RCMI website. I'll send you the link for the particular link placed on the website. You can see the video. You can also send me an email, redcap@howard.edu. Shoot me an email, and I'll give you any updates on the recordings. But we should have it by probably either tomorrow or beginning of next week. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. It's been great. Amanda, as always, thank you.
Yep, fabulous opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
Bye.
Thank you, Crystal, too. All right, bye.